How does a quiet man, dismissed as simple and compliant, turn the tables on a wife who thought she could steal everything and walk away smiling? The night she slid those documents across the table, she believed she had won. The next morning, her scream echoed through the house because I had prepared for her betrayal, and the truth was about to end her family's free ride forever. The fluorescent light in our garage workshop flickered as I tightened the last bolt on the soft serve machine. It was past midnight, and my hands were stained with grease and metal shavings. The converted ice cream truck sat before me like a patient waiting for surgery, which, in a way, it was. This was our 5th truck, and like the others, I'd rebuilt it from the ground up. "Warren, are you still out there?" Lorraine's voice drifted from the kitchen door, carrying that familiar note of irritation. "Almost done," I called back, wiping my hands on an old rag. The machine hummed to life, perfect and ready for tomorrow's route through downtown. When I finally made it inside, Lorraine was sitting at our kitchen table with a stack of papers spread before her, calculator in hand. She didn't look up when I entered. "How's the truck coming?" she asked, still focused on her numbers. "Ready for the morning shift. The compressor was shot, but I managed to rebuild it instead of buying a new one. Saved us about $3,000. She nodded absently. "Good. We need to watch every penny." I poured myself a glass of water and sat across from her. "Speaking of pennies, how are we doing this month? The downtown routes have been busier than ever, but when I checked the business account last week..." "Warren." Lorraine finally looked up, her green eyes sharp. "I handle the books. You handle the trucks. That's how this works, remember?" "I know, but I was just wondering." "We live simply," she said, gathering the papers into a neat pile. "That's enough. We don't need to be greedy." The phrase had become her mantra over the past 2 years. Whenever I asked about expanding our fleet, hiring help, or even taking a small vacation, she'd repeat those same words. "We live simply. That's enough." But as I watched her lock the financial documents in her desk drawer, something nagged at me. If we were living so simply, why did I have to borrow money from my friend Brendan last month just to make the truck payments? The next morning, I was loading supplies into truck number 3 when Curtis Connolly pulled up in a gleaming silver BMW. Lorraine's younger brother stepped out, adjusting his expensive sunglasses. "Morning, Warren," he said, not bothering to hide his smirk as he surveyed my work clothes. "Still playing with your toys, I see." "Morning, Curtis." I continued stacking cups and napkins. "Nice car. New?" "Just picked it up yesterday. Figured it was time for an upgrade." He ran his hand along the hood. "German engineering. You probably wouldn't understand the difference." Curtis had always talked to me like I was slow, ever since Lorraine and I started dating 25 years ago. Back then, he was a college dropout living in his parents' basement. Now he worked sporadically in consulting, though I'd never been clear on what exactly he consulted about. "Must have cost a fortune," I said. "Well, some of us know how to make smart investments." He glanced at his watch. Also new, I noticed. "Is Lorraine around? I need to discuss some family business with her." Before I could answer, Lorraine emerged from the house, her face lighting up when she saw her brother. "Curtis, you're early." She gave him a hug, then stepped back to admire the BMW. "Oh my goodness, it's beautiful." "Thought you'd like it. Ready for lunch?" "Absolutely. Warren, Curtis, and I are going to discuss some family matters. Don't wait up." They drove off together, leaving me standing in our driveway with a truck full of ice cream and a growing list of questions. That afternoon, I worked the downtown city square route. The summer heat had drawn huge crowds, and I sold out of everything by 4 o'clock. As I counted the day's earnings, I felt that familiar satisfaction of honest work, well done. We'd taken in nearly $800, one of our best single truck days ever. But when I got home, Lorraine barely looked up from her laptop when I reported the numbers. "Good," she said. "I'll add it to the deposit." "Lorraine, with days like this, maybe we should think about..." "Warren, please, I'm trying to concentrate. That evening, we attended the monthly Chamber of Commerce mixer downtown. These events were important for our business, a chance to network with other local entrepreneurs and potential clients. But as we mingled with the crowd, I noticed something that had become increasingly common. "Lorraine Hollis," called out Margaret Fletcher, who owned 3 downtown restaurants. "I've been meaning to tell you how impressed I am with your ice cream business. Such innovation." "Thank you," Lorraine replied, beaming. "It's been quite a journey building it from nothing." I stood beside her, invisible. Margaret continued gushing about Lorraine's vision and business acumen, never once acknowledging that I was the one who'd converted every truck, designed the routes, and handled all the mechanical work. "You must be so proud," Margaret said to me finally, as an afterthought, "having such an enterprising wife." "I am," I said. "Though we built it together. I handle the technical side." "Warren's very handy," Lorraine interrupted with a patronizing smile. "I don't know what I'd do without someone to fix things when they break." The conversation moved on, leaving me feeling like hired help at my own company's networking event. Later that night, as I was taking out the trash, I noticed something sticking out of the recycling bin beside Lorraine's desk. Bank statements. I glanced toward the living room where she was watching television, then quietly pulled the papers free. What I saw sent a sharp chill through me. The statements showed our business account, but the balance was far lower than it should have been based on our recent sales. More troubling were the regular withdrawals, large ones, always in round numbers. $20,000 on the 15th of each month, like clockwork. I stuffed the papers into my jacket and went to bed, but sleep didn't come. As Lorraine slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how long this had been going on. The next morning, I drove to Brendan McCoy's garage on the other side of town. Brendan had been my closest friend since high school, and his auto repair shop had helped keep our ice cream trucks running during the lean early years. "Warren!" He glanced up from beneath the hood of a sedan, his weathered face spreading into a grin. "What brings you by? Don't tell me another compressor gave out." "Actually, I was hoping we could talk, privately." His expression grew serious. He wiped his hands on a rag and led me to his small office in the back. "What's going on?" he asked, closing the door. I pulled out the bank statements. "I found these in Lorraine's trash. Look at the withdrawal pattern." Brendan studied the papers, his frown deepening. $20,000 a month. Warren, that's $250,000 a year. Where's that money going?" "I don't know, but it explains why I had to borrow from you last month. Brendan, based on our sales, we should be profitable enough to expand. Instead, I'm scrambling to make loan payments." "Have you asked Lorraine about this?" "She shuts me down every time I try to discuss finances, says I should focus on the trucks and let her handle the business side." Brendan leaned back in his chair. "You know, I've always wondered about her family. Curtis drives around in cars that cost more than most people make in a year. And last time I saw Philip and Maureen Connolly at the grocery store, Maureen was wearing jewelry that could fund a small business. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see." "There's something else," I said. "Remember when we started the business? Lorraine always talks about her vision and how she built it from nothing. But you were there, Brendan. You remember what really happened." He nodded slowly. "You came to me with sketches of truck conversions. You'd worked out the routes, the supply chain, everything. Lorraine handled the paperwork and permits, but the business concept was yours." I thought back to those early days. I'd been working as a refrigeration technician, but I'd always dreamed of being my own boss. The ice cream truck idea came to me during a particularly hot summer when I noticed how few mobile food vendors served the downtown business district. I'd spent months researching, planning, and designing the truck conversions. Lorraine had been supportive, helping with the legal and administrative aspects. But somewhere along the way, the narrative had shifted. In public, she'd become the visionary entrepreneur, and I'd become the helpful husband who fixed things when they broke. You need to protect yourself, Brendan said. If money's disappearing from the business, you need to know where it's going and why. That afternoon, I had lunch with Everett Gaines, our family lawyer and an old friend of my father's. We met at a quiet coffee shop downtown, away from anywhere Lorraine might see us. Warren, Everett said, stirring his coffee thoughtfully, I'm going to ask you a direct question. Do you have full access to all your business documents? What do you mean? Bank accounts, contracts, incorporation papers, tax filings. Can you walk into your bank right now and get statements for all your business accounts? I realized I couldn't. Lorraine had gradually taken over all financial management, claiming it was more efficient to have one person handle everything. I didn't even know if there were accounts I wasn't aware of. That's what I was afraid of, Everett said. Warren, in a partnership, even a marriage, both parties should have full transparency about business finances. The fact that you don't is a red flag. What should I do? First, get copies of everything you can access. Second, if you suspect financial irregularities, you need to document them. And third, he paused, choosing his words carefully. You might want to consider what your options are if this situation gets worse. That evening, Lorraine's parents hosted their monthly family dinner. The Connolly house in Maple Heights was a testament to old money, or at least the appearance of it. Philip Connolly had retired from middle management at an insurance company, and Maureen had never worked outside the home, yet they lived like minor aristocracy. Warren, Philip said as we sat down to dinner, Maureen was just telling me how well the ice cream business is doing. Lorraine's really made something special. It's been a team effort, I replied. Oh, of course, Maureen said with a dismissive wave. But we all know who has the business mind in the family. Lorraine gets that from my side. The Connollys have always been entrepreneurs. I bit my tongue. Philip had worked the same insurance job for 30 years, and the only business venture I knew of in the Connolly family history was Maureen's brief attempt at selling cosmetics door-to-door in the 1980s. Speaking of business, Curtis said, cutting into his steak, I've been thinking about some investment opportunities that might interest you, Lorraine. High-yield stuff, but it requires significant capital. How significant? Lorraine asked. 6 figures to start, but the returns could be substantial. I noticed that Curtis didn't even glance in my direction during this conversation. It was as if I wasn't there, despite being half owner of the business they were discussing investing. After dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom and couldn't help but notice the expensive renovations since our last visit. New hardwood floors, designer light fixtures, and a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. All of this on a retiree's pension? On the drive home, I finally asked Lorraine about it. Your parents' house looks great. They must have spent a fortune on those renovations. They're comfortable, she said curtly. But how do they afford it? Your dad's been retired for 5 years. Warren, that's really none of our business. I'm just curious. And Curtis seems to be doing well too. That new BMW must have cost $60,000 at least. Lorraine's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Curtis is a successful consultant. He works hard for his money. What kind of consulting does he do exactly? Why are you suddenly so interested in my family's finances? Because I can barely afford to keep our trucks running, but your family seems to be living like millionaires. That's enough. Her voice was ice cold. I don't appreciate you questioning my family's success just because you're feeling insecure about your own contributions. The words hit like a slap. My own contributions. I'd built the entire technical foundation of our business, often working 18-hour days to keep the trucks running and the routes profitable. When we got home, I went straight to the garage. Being around the trucks, the tools, and the honest work of mechanical repair helped calm my racing thoughts. But as I organized my workbench, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I'd built was slipping away. That night, as Lorraine slept, I lay awake, making a decision. I needed answers, and I needed to protect myself. Tomorrow, I would start gathering evidence. The next morning, I drove to our bank's main branch downtown. I'd been putting off this conversation, but I needed to know exactly where we stood financially. "Mr. Hollis," the branch manager, Patricia Hoffman, greeted me warmly. "How can I help you today?" "I'd like to review our business account statements for the past year. Complete records." Her smile faltered slightly. "Of course. Though I should mention, your wife was just in yesterday requesting the same information." That caught me off guard. "She was?" "Yes, she seemed quite concerned about some discrepancies. She mentioned you might be coming in to discuss them." Patricia printed out the statements, and I found a quiet corner of the bank to review them. What I saw was worse than I'd imagined. The regular $20,000 withdrawals had been going on for over 2 years, but more disturbing were the memo lines. Curtis Connolly, consulting fee, and P&M Connolly, advisory services. My wife had been systematically draining our business to pay her family, disguising it as legitimate business expenses. Over 2 years, she'd transferred nearly $500,000. I thought about all the times I'd had to scrape together money for truck repairs, the loan I'd taken against our house to buy the 4th truck, the nights I'd borrowed from Brendan just to make payroll for our part-time drivers. All while Lorraine's family lived in luxury. That afternoon, I drove to Curtis's apartment complex. I'd never visited him there, but Lorraine had mentioned he'd moved to an upscale place downtown. What I found was a luxury high-rise with a doorman and valet parking. I didn't go inside, but I didn't need to. The BMW was parked in front, alongside a motorcycle that looked like it cost more than most people's cars. Through the lobby's floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see marble floors and crystal chandeliers. This was where our missing profits were going. That evening, I waited until Lorraine was in the shower, then went to her locked desk drawer. I'd watched her open it enough times to know she kept the key taped under the drawer above. Inside, I found a treasure trove of documents. Bank statements going back 3 years, contracts I'd never seen, and most damning of all, a folder labeled Business Restructuring that contained papers transferring full ownership of our company to Lorraine alone. My hands shook as I photographed everything with my phone. The restructuring documents were dated 6 months ago, but I'd never signed them. Yet there was my signature, perfectly forged. I was still processing this betrayal when I heard Lorraine's footsteps in the hallway. I quickly closed the drawer and pretended to be checking my email. "Warren," she said, appearing in the doorway in her bathrobe, "we need to talk." My heart hammered, but I kept my voice steady. "About what?" "I know you went to the bank today. Patricia called me." So much for discretion. I wanted to understand our financial situation. "And what did you find?" I studied her face. She looked calm, almost relieved, as if she'd been waiting for this conversation. "I found regular payments to your family, large ones." "Yes." She sat down across from me. "I've been supporting them." "Supporting them?" "Lorraine, that's our business money. Money we need to operate and grow." "It's my money too, Warren, and they're my family." "But you never told me. You've been lying to me for years while I struggled to keep the business afloat." Her expression hardened. "You wouldn't have understood. You would have said we couldn't afford it." "Because we couldn't. I've been borrowing money from friends while you've been playing Santa Claus to your family. My family deserves better than the hand they've been dealt. Curtis is brilliant, but he's had some bad breaks. My parents worked hard their whole lives and deserve to enjoy their retirement." "What about what I deserve?" "I built this business, Lorraine. Those trucks exist because I designed and converted them. The routes work because I planned them. But somehow I'm the one who can't afford to fix a broken compressor without begging for loans." "You built the trucks," she said coldly. "I built the business. There's a difference." "Is that what you tell yourself?" "It's the truth. You're good with your hands, Warren, but you don't understand the bigger picture. You never have." The contempt in her voice was like a physical blow. This was what she really thought of me, a useful mechanic, too simple to understand real business. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my workshop. Get out of my garage. Get out of my sight." She stood up, her face flushed with anger. This is my house too. The house I've been paying for while you divert our profits to support your relatives. How dare you? How dare I? How dare you? You've been stealing from our business for years, forging my signature and treating me like I'm too stupid to notice. I haven't stolen anything. I've been managing our finances responsibly. $20,000 a month to your brother and parents is responsible? They're family. So am I, or I thought I was. Lorraine stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. The mask was coming off. You know what, Warren? You're right. You are family. You're the family member who does what he's told and doesn't ask questions. You're the one who fixes things when they break and stays out of the way when real decisions need to be made. Is that really what you think? It's what I know. And if you don't like it, maybe you should think about whether this arrangement still works for you. She turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the devastating clarity of what my marriage had become. 3 days later, she slid a thick stack of documents across our kitchen table. I need you to sign these, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I glanced at the papers. They were dense with legal language, but I could make out enough to understand the general concept. Business restructuring, transfer of assets, dissolution of partnership. What exactly am I signing? Just some paperwork to formalize our business structure, make things cleaner for tax purposes. Lorraine, I'm not signing anything without reading it thoroughly. Warren, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You trust me, don't you? I looked at her sitting across from me, still beautiful at 48, still able to smile and speak in reasonable tones while asking me to sign away everything I'd built. Of course I trust you, I said, picking up the pen. I signed every page without reading another word. Her smile became genuine then, the first real warmth I'd seen from her in months. Thank you, she said. This will be better for everyone. I'm sure it will be. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I called Everett Gaines. It's done, I said. She had me sign the papers. Did you read them first? Every word. While she was at lunch yesterday. It's exactly what we expected. Complete transfer of business ownership to her, with a small settlement for me. And you're sure about the clause we added? Page 12, paragraph 4. Hidden in the middle of a section about tax liability. She'll never notice it until it's too late. Warren, I have to ask one more time. Are you sure you want to do this? I thought about the forged signatures, the stolen money, the years of condescension and lies. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The next morning, I drove to Everett's office with a box full of documents. Over the past week, I'd been methodically gathering evidence, and the picture it painted was even worse than I'd initially thought. Warren, Everett said, reviewing the bank statements spread across his conference table, this is systematic fraud. She's been embezzling from your joint business for over 2 years. Can we prove it? With these records? Absolutely. The payments to her family members are clearly documented, and none of them appear to have provided any legitimate services to your business. Curtis Connolly hasn't filed any business income for consulting work, according to the tax records I pulled. I sat back in my chair, feeling a mixture of vindication and sadness. What are my options? Several. We can file for divorce, citing financial fraud. We can demand a full accounting of all business assets. We can sue for recovery of the embezzled funds. And given what she just had you sign, we can trigger the clause that freezes all assets pending investigation. The clause Everett was referring to was our insurance policy. While Lorraine thought she was having me sign away my rights to the business, I'd actually been signing a modified version of the documents. Hidden in the dense legal language was a provision that any attempt to unilaterally transfer business ownership would trigger an automatic forensic audit and asset freeze. Lorraine's lawyer had reviewed the documents, but like most people, they'd focused on the major provisions and missed the small print. It was a trick Everett had learned in 30 years of practice. Sometimes the most important clauses were the ones that looked like boilerplate. There's something else, I said, pulling out my phone. I want to call Tyler. Tyler Hollis was our 21-year-old son, currently a junior at the University of Colorado studying business. He was a good kid, smart, fair-minded, and surprisingly mature for his age. But he'd been away at school during most of the recent drama, and Lorraine had been carefully controlling the narrative in their phone calls. "Dad?" Tyler's voice came through clearly on the video call. "This is a surprise. How are things?" "That's what I wanted to talk to you about, son. There are some things happening with the business and your mother that you need to know about." I spent the next hour laying out everything: the missing money, the payments to Curtis and his grandparents, the forged documents, and Lorraine's attempt to take sole ownership of the business. Tyler's expression grew increasingly serious as I talked. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Dad," he finally said, "I had no idea. Mom always made it sound like you were, well, like you were just the mechanic and she was running everything. That's the story she's been telling everyone. But you remember when we started the business, don't you? You were in high school, but you helped me convert the first truck." "I remember. You designed everything, the layout, the equipment placement, even the route optimization. Mom handled the permits and paperwork, but the whole concept was yours. Your mother's been telling people she built the business from nothing. That's not true, and I know it. Dad, I'm sorry. I should have asked more questions. You had no reason to doubt your mother, but Tyler, I need you to know that I'm filing for divorce. This isn't about the money. Well, it's not just about the money. It's about respect and honesty, and your mother has shown me that our marriage has neither." Tyler nodded slowly. "I understand. And Dad, for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. What she did, that's not okay." Having my son's support meant more than I could express. Tyler had always been close to his mother, but he had a strong sense of justice that wouldn't let him overlook what she'd done. After the call, Everett and I spent another hour organizing the evidence and planning our strategy. The beauty of our approach was that we weren't doing anything underhanded or illegal. We were simply using the legal system exactly as it was designed to work. "When do you want to move forward?" Everett asked. "Tomorrow. I want to file everything before Lorraine has a chance to transfer any more assets." That evening, I went home to find Lorraine in an unusually good mood. She was humming while she cooked dinner, and she actually smiled when I walked in. "Good day?" I asked. "Very good. I had lunch with Curtis and my parents. We're planning a little celebration dinner this weekend." "What are we celebrating?" "New beginnings," she said cryptically. "Fresh starts. The future." I nodded and went to wash up, knowing that her celebration was going to be very short-lived. That night, as she slept peacefully beside me, I packed a small bag with essentials and moved my most important personal items to a storage unit I'd rented across town. I wasn't planning to disappear, but I wanted to make sure my belongings were safe during what was about to become a very contentious situation. I also spent time in the garage, going through my tools and equipment. The trucks themselves would be part of the business assets under dispute, but my personal tools were mine. I'd bought most of them long before I met Lorraine, and I'd need them no matter what happened. As I worked, I thought about the early days of our marriage. Lorraine had been different then, or maybe I'd been too naive to see who she really was. She'd been supportive of my dreams, or so I'd thought. But looking back, I wondered if she'd simply seen an opportunity to build something she could eventually control. The ice cream truck business had been my idea, my design, built through my own effort and long hours. But somewhere along the way, Lorraine had convinced everyone, including me for a while, that it was her vision and her success. Tomorrow, that narrative was going to change. The next morning, I was at the courthouse when it opened. Everett met me there with all our paperwork prepared. Filing for divorce was surprisingly simple, just a matter of submitting the right forms and paying the fees, but we were filing for much more than just divorce. "Petition for dissolution of marriage," Everett said, handing documents to the clerk. "Motion for forensic accounting of all business assets. request for temporary restraining order preventing transfer of business assets, and complaint for recovery of funds obtained through fraudulent transfer. The clerk processed everything efficiently, stamping each document with the official court seal. In a matter of minutes, I'd gone from being a victim of financial fraud to being a plaintiff in a lawsuit. "How long before Lorraine is served?" I asked as we walked back to Everett's car. "The sheriff's department will serve her this afternoon. She'll have 48 hours to respond, but the asset freeze goes into effect immediately." "And the clause we embedded in the documents she had me sign?" "That triggers automatically as soon as she tries to access any business accounts, which, based on her pattern, should be sometime today when she tries to make this month's payment to her family." The beauty of our strategy was its simplicity. We weren't trying to outsmart anyone or pull some elaborate con. We were just using the legal system to enforce the contracts that already existed and recover money that had been stolen. That afternoon, I was working on truck number 2 when my phone rang. It was Brendan. "Warren, you need to get down here right now." "What's wrong?" "Curtis just showed up at my shop screaming about how I need to convince you to be reasonable. He's making threats." I drove to Brendan's garage to find Curtis pacing in the parking lot, his face red with anger. "Warren," he shouted when he saw me. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't play dumb. The bank froze Lorraine's accounts. Our accounts. You're screwing with the wrong family." "I'm not screwing with anyone, Curtis. I'm just making sure all our business finances are properly documented." "You vindictive little—" He stepped toward me, but Brendan moved between us. "That's enough," Brendan said calmly. "Curtis, you need to leave." "This isn't over," Curtis said, pointing at me. "My sister built that business, and you're not going to steal it from her." "Your sister built it?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Curtis, I don't think you've ever even seen the inside of one of our trucks. You certainly haven't contributed anything to building them." "I've been consulting." "On what?" "You've never worked in food service, never operated a business, never even held a steady job for more than 6 months. What exactly have you been consulting about?" He didn't have an answer for that, which told me everything I needed to know. That evening, Lorraine came home in a fury. She slammed the front door so hard the windows rattled. "Warren, get in here right now!" I found her standing in the living room, holding the divorce papers. "What is this?" she demanded. "I think it's pretty self-explanatory." "You're divorcing me? Over money?" "I'm divorcing you over lies, theft, and 25 years of being treated like I'm too stupid to notice what you were doing. I never stole anything." $20,000 a month to your family, Lorraine. For 2 years. That's nearly $500,000 taken from our business without my knowledge or consent. They're family, and it wasn't theft. I have every right to make financial decisions for our business. Our business. You just said it yourself. Our business, not your business. Which means major financial decisions should be made by both of us. You wouldn't have understood. "Stop saying that," I shouted, my composure finally cracking. "Stop telling me I wouldn't understand. I understand perfectly. You've been stealing from our business to support your lazy brother and your pretentious parents while I worked 18-hour days to keep us afloat. Curtis isn't lazy. He's been providing valuable consulting services." "What services? Name one specific thing Curtis has done for our business." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "That's what I thought," I said. "And your parents? What advisory services have they provided that were worth $10,000 a month?" They have experience. Your father sold insurance for 30 years, and your mother has never worked a day in her life. What possible advice could they give about running an ice cream truck business?" Lorraine's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You're just jealous because my family is successful." "Successful?" "Lorraine, your family is successful because I've been funding their lifestyle for 2 years. Take away the money I've been unknowingly providing, and what do they have? Curtis can't hold a job, and your parents are living on Social Security." "How dare you?" How dare I tell the truth? Your family has been living off my work while treating me like I'm beneath them. Well, that ends now. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out her next move. Warren, she said, her voice suddenly softer, we can work this out. We don't need lawyers and courts. We're both reasonable people. Are we? Because a reasonable person doesn't embezzle $500,000 from their spouse. I didn't embezzle anything. I was supporting my family. With stolen money. It wasn't stolen. Then why didn't you tell me about it? She didn't have an answer for that either. The next morning, Lorraine left early for what she said was a family meeting. I suspected they were trying to figure out how to respond to the legal action, but it was too late for that. The asset freeze was already in effect, and any attempt to hide or transfer assets would only make things worse for them. That afternoon, Everett called with an update. The bank confirms that Lorraine tried to access the business accounts this morning. When she was denied, she demanded to speak to the branch manager. According to Patricia Hoffman, she became quite agitated when she learned about the court order. What happens next? We wait for her lawyer to respond to our filings. But Warren, I should warn you, this is about to get ugly. When people realize their free money is disappearing, they tend to get desperate. He was right. That evening, my phone started ringing. First Curtis, then Lorraine's parents, then Lorraine herself. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages were predictable. Curtis was angry and threatening. Philip and Maureen were confused and hurt, claiming they didn't understand why I was attacking the family. Lorraine was alternately pleading and furious, begging me to be reasonable one moment and calling me vindictive the next. But I was done being reasonable. I'd been reasonable for 25 years while my wife systematically undermined and stole from me. I'd been reasonable when her family treated me like hired help. I'd been reasonable when I had to borrow money from friends while they lived in luxury. Now it was time for justice. 2 weeks later, we all gathered in the conference room of Henderson and Associates, the mediation firm Everett had recommended. The room was sterile and professional, with a long mahogany table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown. Lorraine arrived with her lawyer, Patricia Vance, a sharp-dressed woman in her 50s who'd built a reputation handling high-conflict divorces. Curtis and Philip accompanied them, both looking uncomfortable in suits that seemed too formal for their usual casual style. I sat across from them with Everett, a thick file folder in front of me. I'd insisted on mediation rather than going straight to court, not because I wanted to compromise, but because I wanted to watch their faces when the truth came out. Before we begin, the mediator said, I want to establish that we're here to discuss the dissolution of the Hollis marriage and the division of business assets. Mr. Hollis has made some serious allegations about financial impropriety, and Mrs. Hollis disputes those allegations. That's right, Patricia Vance said confidently. My client has been managing the family business responsibly for years. Mr. Hollis's accusations are baseless and appear to be motivated by spite. I see, the mediator said. Mr. Gaines, would you like to present your client's position? Everett opened our file folder and pulled out the first set of documents. Certainly. Let's start with the bank records. He placed copies of the statements in front of everyone at the table. Lorraine's confident expression began to falter as she saw the highlighted entries. These records show systematic transfers from the Hollis Ice Cream Company business account to personal accounts belonging to Curtis Connolly and Philip and Maureen Connolly. Everett continued. Over 24 months, these transfers total $487,000. Patricia Vance studied the documents, her frown deepening. These appear to be legitimate business expenses. For what services? I asked quietly. Consulting and advisory fees, Lorraine said quickly. I see. Everett pulled out another set of documents. These are tax returns filed by Curtis Connolly for the past 3 years. Mr. Connolly has reported no business income from consulting work. In fact, he's reported virtually no income at all. Curtis shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I handle my taxes differently. By not reporting income? Everett asked. Because if you received nearly $250,000 in consulting fees over 2 years, that would be taxable income that you're legally required to report. Now wait a minute, Philip interjected. We were told these were legitimate business arrangements. What business arrangements? I asked, looking directly at him. Philip, what specific services did you provide to our ice cream truck business that were worth $10,000 a month? Lorraine said you needed financial advice. From someone who's never run a business? Philip, no offense, but you sold insurance policies for 30 years. What could you possibly advise us about food service operations? The room fell silent except for the sound of papers shuffling. There's more, Everett said. He pulled out copies of the business incorporation documents. When Mr. and Mrs. Hollis formed their business partnership, they agreed to joint ownership and joint decision-making authority for all major financial decisions. Transfers of this magnitude would certainly qualify as major financial decisions. Warren knew about the family support, Lorraine said, but her voice lacked conviction. Did he? Everett placed another document on the table. This is a sworn affidavit from Brendan McCoy, stating that Mr. Hollis borrowed money from him on 3 separate occasions because the business account didn't have sufficient funds for equipment repairs. If Mr. Hollis knew about and approved these transfers, why was he borrowing money from friends? Patricia Vance was looking increasingly uncomfortable. My client was managing cash flow. By stealing from the business to fund her family's lifestyle, I said. Lorraine, Curtis bought a $60,000 BMW with our money. Your parents renovated their entire house. You've been playing benefactor with profits that should have been reinvested in the business or saved for emergencies. They're family, Lorraine snapped. I have every right to help my family. With your own money, yes. With stolen money, no. I didn't steal anything. Then why did you hide it? I asked. Why did you lock the financial documents away? Why did you refuse to discuss business finances with me? Why did you forge my signature on ownership transfer documents? The final accusation landed with explosive force. Patricia Vance's head snapped up. Forged signature? Everett placed the forged documents on the table next to samples of my real signature. The differences were subtle but clear once you knew what to look for. Mrs. Hollis attempted to transfer full ownership of the business to herself using documents with a forged signature, Everett explained. She then presented different documents to Mr. Hollis, claiming they were for tax purposes. That's not, Lorraine started, then stopped. Her face had gone pale. Actually, Everett continued, those documents Mr. Hollis signed contained a very interesting clause. Let me read it for you. He pulled out a copy of the papers I'd signed and turned to page 12. Any attempt to unilaterally transfer business ownership or assets without proper legal authority shall trigger an immediate forensic audit of all business finances and a freeze of all business assets pending resolution of any discrepancies. Patricia Vance stared at the document. You signed this? Every page, I said. I read it very carefully. But this means, she turned to Lorraine, this means the asset freeze was triggered by your own actions. You tried to transfer ownership, which activated the very clause that froze everything. Lorraine's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But Warren signed. I signed the documents you gave me, I said. I just made sure to read them first and make a few small modifications. Nothing major, just some protective language that my lawyer suggested. You can't do that, Curtis shouted. You can't just change legal documents. Actually, Everett said calmly, Mr. Hollis can modify any document before signing it, as long as the modifications are clearly noted, which they were, in the margin of page 12, initialed by both parties. Lorraine frantically flipped through her copy of the documents, looking for the modification. When she found it, her face went white. You tricked me. I protected myself, I corrected. Just like you've been protecting your family by stealing from our business. The mediator cleared his throat. Given these revelations, I think we need to discuss restitution and asset division. Restitution? Philip asked weakly. The money that was improperly transferred will need to be returned to the business, Everett explained. With interest. We're talking about roughly $500,000. We don't have that kind of money, Curtis protested. Then you'll need to liquidate assets, I said. The BMW, the house renovations, whatever you bought with my money. Your money? Maureen spoke for the first time, her voice shrill. Warren, we're family. How can you do this to family? Family? I looked around the table at their faces, angry, entitled, desperate. Maureen, when have you ever treated me like family? When have any of you shown me the slightest respect or consideration? We've always been kind to you. You've been condescending to me. You've dismissed my contributions to the business. You've acted like I was too stupid to notice what was happening. And all the while, you've been living off the profits of my work. Lorraine built that business, Curtis shouted. I built that business, I shouted back, standing up from the table. I designed the trucks, I planned the routes, I worked 18-hour days to make it successful. Lorraine handled paperwork and permits, that's it. But somehow she convinced everyone that she was the visionary and I was just the mechanic. You are just a mechanic, Curtis sneered. A mechanic who built a $500,000 business that's been supporting your entire family for 2 years. The room erupted in shouting. Curtis was on his feet, pointing at me and calling me names. Maureen was crying and wailing about how ungrateful I was. Philip was demanding to know how they were supposed to pay back money they'd already spent. And in the middle of it all, Lorraine sat in stunned silence, finally understanding that her carefully constructed plan had collapsed completely. Enough! The mediator shouted, bringing the room back to order. Mr. Hollis, what are your terms for settlement? I sat back down and looked directly at Lorraine. Full restitution of all improperly transferred funds, dissolution of the marriage with equitable division of legitimate assets, and complete severance of all financial ties to the Connolly family. That's impossible, Patricia Vance said. My client can't be held responsible for gifts to family members. They weren't gifts, Everett replied. They were fraudulent transfers from a business account, and Mrs. Hollis can absolutely be held responsible, both civilly and criminally. Criminally? Lorraine's voice was barely a whisper. Embezzlement is a felony, I said. Though I'm willing to handle this as a civil matter if full restitution is made. Lorraine looked around the table at her family, her brother who couldn't hold a job, her parents who'd never appreciated anything I'd done for them, her lawyer who was already calculating how to minimize her own liability. I need time to think, she said finally. You have 24 hours, I replied. After that, we file criminal charges. As everyone gathered their papers and prepared to leave, Lorraine caught my arm. Warren, please, we can work this out. We don't need to destroy each other. I looked at her, really looked at her, for what I knew would be the last time as